Imagine, for a moment, the quiet, somber stables of the Artis Magistra Zoo in Amsterdam. The date is August 12, 1883. Inside a small enclosure stands a single, peculiar animal. Her front half is heavily striped in stark black and white, resembling a zebra. But as your eyes move down her back, the stripes blur, fading into a smooth, solid chestnut brown, much like a horse. She is old, tired, and entirely alone. For years, she has been a living curiosity for the affluent Dutch elite, a strange beast brought over from the sun-scorched plains of South Africa. On this humid summer afternoon, the mare collapses. She lets out a final, laboring breath and dies on the straw-covered floor. The zookeepers, relatively unfazed by the loss of a single exhibit, simply log her death in the registry. A few days later, the zoo administrators draft a routine letter to their hunters and animal traders in the Cape Colony of South Africa. The letter contains a simple, standard request. Our mare has died. Please capture and send us another quagga. Months pass. The ships from Cape Town arrive, but they carry no quaggas. Finally, a response reaches the European continent, carrying a chilling revelation that would echo through the halls of history. The hunters bluntly informed the zoo, "We cannot send you another quagga. There are no more. They are all gone." In that quiet stable in Amsterdam, humanity had not just lost an animal, we had witnessed an extinction without even realizing it. The death of that lonely mare marked the total erasure of one of the most magnificent and unique creatures to ever walk the earth. This is not a myth, nor a creature born of fantasy or folklore. This is the tragic, entirely true story of the quagga, an animal that was half zebra, half horse, and completely misunderstood. To truly comprehend how an animal whose herds once numbered in the hundreds of thousands could vanish from the face of the planet in less than a century, we must travel back in time, far away from the cold enclosures of Europe to the endless golden grasslands of South Africa. For millennia, the Karoo and the southern Free State of South Africa were a thriving, dynamic ecosystem. Amidst the seas of brown and white antelopes, wildebeests, and ostriches, the quagga reigned supreme. They were magnificent, fast-running grazers, moving in massive herds of 30 to 50 individuals. The indigenous Khoikhoi people lived alongside these animals for generations. In fact, the very name quagga was given to them by the Khoikhoi. It is an onomatopoeia, a word meant to mimic the distinct barking, braying call the animal made, which sounded like qua ha ha. Unlike the plains zebras found further north, which are fully coated in dizzying stripes, the quagga had evolved the unique coat pattern. The heavy striping on their heads and necks helped them blend in with tall grasses and confuse predators like lions, while their solid, tawny brown rears helped them camouflage against the dusty, sun-baked earth of the southern African plains. They were a masterpiece of natural adaptation, a vital part of the ecological balance, keeping the grasslands healthy by grazing and fertilizing the soil. The quagga was not a freak of nature. It was the undisputed king of the Karoo. But the harmony of the plains was violently disrupted in the 17th and 18th centuries. European ships began arriving at the Cape of Good Hope. Dutch settlers, known as Boers or Voortrekkers, pushed inland, seeking fresh territory to establish massive farms and begin a new life. As they drove their wagons into the interior, they claimed the vast open grasslands as their own. To the settlers, the land was seemingly empty and ready for the taking, but they were invading a finely tuned ecosystem. As they introduced massive herds of domestic sheep, goats, and cattle, a fatal conflict ignited. The quaggas, simply following their ancient migratory routes to find seasonal summer rains and fresh grass, suddenly found themselves standing on newly fenced farmland. The settlers did not look at the quagga with a sense of wonder. They did not see a unique evolutionary marvel. They saw a pest. They saw a fast-breeding, grass-eating nuisance that was stealing food from their valuable livestock. The quagga could not be tamed or broken like a domestic horse, meaning it offered no labor value to the farmers. And so, the extermination began. At first, it was a localized effort to protect farmland, but soon it morphed into an industry of slaughter. The quaggas were hunted relentlessly. Their meat, though not considered a delicacy by the wealthy, became the primary food source for the thousands of farm servants and later the diamond miners who flocked to regions like Kimberley. But the true driver of their demise was their unique, half-striped hide. Quagga skin was highly prized for making durable grain sacks, leather shoes, and decorative rugs. Think about this for a moment. Put yourself in the shoes of someone living in the mid-1800s. If you looked out over the horizon and saw a herd of 100,000 wild animals stretching as far as the eye could see, could you ever fathom that your own actions could wipe them all out in your lifetime? How often do we look at the boundless abundance of nature and assume it is infinite? The settlers and hunters of the era believed the African continent was simply too vast, too wild, and too overflowing with life for any single species to ever be hunted to extinction. It is a chilling reflection of human hubris, the assumption that the well will never run dry, right up until the moment we take the last drop. Do we still make this exact same mistake today with our oceans, our forests, and our climate? The slaughter of the quagga was accelerated by the arrival of British big game hunters in the 19th century. Armed with advanced firearms, these men treated the African plains as an unlimited shooting gallery. Men like Cornwallis Harris openly wrote about their shooting madness, riding out daily to gun down quaggas not just for meat or hides, but for the sheer, intoxicating thrill of the kill. Because horses could outrun quaggas, hunting parties easily chased down the herds, firing into the masses. In 1843, near Colesburg, historians note that gunshots rang out almost daylight hour. It was a relentless, mechanized wave of death that the quagga, an animal that had survived droughts, lions, and millennia of natural challenges, could not adapt to. While the wild populations were being decimated in Africa, a bizarre parallel story was unfolding in Europe. Back in cities like London, Paris, and Amsterdam, the quagga had become a highly coveted status symbol. Wealthy aristocrats and the first zoological societies wanted these exotic half-zebras for their private menageries. Transporting a wild quagga from the African interior to a European zoo was a monumental, expensive task, but the elite were willing to pay. Naturalists of the era even harbored wild dreams of breeding quaggas with domestic horses, hoping to create a new striped super beast of burden that could be utilized across the colonial empires. The Artis Magistra Zoo in Amsterdam, a private institution accessible only to the affluent middle class, proudly displayed their quagga as a symbol of colonial dominance and zoological curiosity. However, because the quaggas in European zoos were viewed as solitary exhibits rather than a species needing saving, captive breeding was virtually non-existent. Zoos assumed that whenever their quagga died, they could simply order a fresh one from the seemingly infinite wild herds in Africa. But the wild herds were already gone. The relentless gunfire, combined with the loss of grazing land and vital water sources, pushed the wild quagga past the point of return. The exact date is hard to pin down in such a vast, underpopulated territory, but historians believe the very last wild quagga was shot dead in the Orange Free State around 1878. The tragedy was compounded by a massive linguistic confusion. In southern Africa, both the Khoikhoi and the Dutch settlers casually referred to almost all zebras as quaggas. Because of this vague terminology, when the true quaggas were rapidly vanishing, nobody in power realized it. When a hunter reported seeing a quagga, they were usually looking at a standard plain zebra. This semantic error hid the extinction in plain sight. The alarm bells never rang. There were no conservation campaigns, no protected reserves, and no desperate attempts to save the species. They simply faded away into the dust of the karoo. This brings us back to that tragic day in August 1883. The mare in Amsterdam was the last of her kind, the final beating heart of a lineage that had graced the earth for hundreds of thousands of years. When she closed her eyes, the book of the Quagga slammed shut forever. For decades, all that remained of this magnificent creature were 23 mounted skins sitting in dusty museum cabinets, a few skulls, and exactly 5 haunting black and white photographs taken at the London Zoo in the 1870s. The quagga became a ghost, a cautionary tale of human greed, colonial exploitation, and the devastating efficiency of the gun. But the story of the quagga does not end in the 19th century. In a twist of fate, the quagga would make history one more time, exactly 100 years after its extinction. In 1984, the quagga achieved a scientific milestone by becoming the first extinct animal in the world to have its DNA successfully extracted and sequenced. Scientists took tissue from a preserved museum skin and made a groundbreaking discovery. For over a century, naturalists believed the quagga was a completely distinct, separate species from the zebra. But the DNA revealed something shocking. The quagga was not a separate species at all. It was actually a direct subspecies of the common plains zebra. They were genetically identical, save for the genes that controlled their unique half-striped coat pattern. This revelation sparked one of the most fascinating and controversial conservation projects in modern history. In 1987, a dedicated team in South Africa launched the Quagga Project. Their goal was unprecedented: to bring the quagga back from the dead. Because the extinct quagga was a subspecies of the plains zebra, the genetic code for that unique brown, half-striped coat was still technically hiding inside the DNA of living zebras. Through a rigorous process of selective backbreeding, scientists began mating zebras that naturally had fewer stripes on their hindquarters. Generation after generation, the foals began to look more and more like the lost ghosts of the karoo. Today, there are over 100 of these animals, known as rao quaggas, living in South Africa. While they are not a true genetic resurrection, the original quagga is gone forever. These new animals look astonishingly like the creatures that were wiped out 150 years ago. They serve as a living, breathing apology, an attempt by humanity to rectify a tragic mistake made through greed and short-sightedness. The history of the quagga is a mirror held up to humanity. It shows us our capacity for immense, unthinking destruction, but also our profound ability to seek redemption and use science to heal the scars we have left on the earth. It forces us to ask ourselves, what other magnificent creatures are we currently pushing toward the edge of the abyss, assuming they will always be there? Are we treating rhinos, elephants, and tigers with the same blind hubris that the settlers showed the quagga? The Amsterdam Zoo didn't know they were watching an extinction. Let us not be the generation that makes the same mistake twice. If this deep dive into the tragic and fascinating history of the quagga opened your eyes, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more untold historical true stories. I want to hear from you. Do you think selective backbreeding projects like the Quagga Project are a brilliant way to right our historical wrongs? Or should we just focus our resources on the animals that are currently endangered? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Share this video with a fellow history or wildlife lover, and I will see you in the next incredible story.